My 39M son, 17M, Bryce dated our neighbor Lana, 17F, for a year. They broke up mid-Jan for reasons I don't know. I won't sugarcoat this, I never liked Lana. She always seemed a little unhinged, controlling and aggressive. She's always demanding Bryce's attention, and there were quite a few times when she showed up on our house out of nowhere, whether it was 7 a.m. or 11 p.m., because Bryce wasn't answering his phone, screaming and calling him a cheater when it wasn't like that. The thought of our son getting abused by his GF made us worried so much. My wife and I tried to talk him out of that relationship. We said how that it wasn't normal nor healthy. We didn't want to force the breakup because we feared Lana would lash out to him, so we tried to do it in a sneaky way. We don't know if it worked, but they ended up breaking up. He said that after he broke up with her, Lana didn't contacted him, which was weird because he expected her to go nuts, but I told him that if fate didn't give him shit he better not tease it. Now the problem is that we bought my son a car for Christmas, nothing fancy but enough to get him to school, his job and eventually college. He parks it in our driveway outside our home. Ever since the month began we had been finding scratches all over the car. We know Lana was doing it, but since it was minimal my son decided to not do anything even if we could prove that it was her. We've CCTV. Still, something smelled bad for me, so I decided to switch one of the cameras facing his car directly just in case. Well, 2 weeks ago we got up and we found my son's car covered in a lot of shit, paint, glue, feathers, confetti. The door handles were wrecked, flat tires, paint all over the windows. You get the picture. Bryce and my wife were so distraught. We called the police and I handled them the CCTV that showed Lana and her brother, 23M, destroying my son's car. We pressed charges and needless to say, Lana's brother went straight to jail, but since she's still a minor her parents want to make a deal, but I refused. I don't think she should get a way out. Before the police was here she was laughing her ass off and she tried to play it cool. If she thought this was funny then she's old enough to face the consequences. My wife and I want to stand our ground. They said they'll buy my son a better car and put Lana on therapy, but is not enough. Ada? My friend Dan recently found out he might be a father. I say might because the girl he's been having an off-on relationship with, Kara, is pregnant, and he's not sure if he's the dad. She offered to get a paternity test once the baby is born and doesn't expect any kind of support until they find out if the baby is his. He's on board with that and appreciates that she's not pushing him into fatherhood if the baby isn't his. The issue is that when he was talking to me about it, he also said he wants to get a maternity test done to make sure the baby is hers. Kara is visibly pregnant. We know she's pregnant because she did a maternity photo shoot and posted it on social media, so it's obvious she's not faking being pregnant. We've both seen her in person, too, and she's most definitely pregnant. However, Dan believes that the baby might not be hers. I tried to explain to him that that's not how biology works, and unless she got an embryo implanted in her then she's definitely the mother. She's a waitress and works for minimum wage plus tips, so I doubt she has the money to afford an embryo implantation. Plus it's ridiculous to think that she'd do all that just to baby trap a guy who is unemployed and living with his parents at 32. Plus he's never donated sperm. He's genuinely convinced that the baby might not biologically be hers, despite not only me, his mom, and our other friends explaining that that's not how pregnancy works. He's still insisting on a maternity test and told me that I was being ridiculous and that I'm the one who doesn't understand biology, despite me studying to be an autopsy pathologist, which has required quite literally years of biology classes. I got fed up and called him a senseless idiot and told him to call me when he got his head screwed back on straight. Ever since then he's been spamming my phone and has gotten a couple of our friends to spam me as well, telling me I'm being insensitive and he's just stressed about possibly being a dad. So, Ada for calling my friend an idiot? My wife has been in constant contact with our daughter-in-law, our son's wife, about plenty of things. Their very recent argument ensued after my wife kept insisting on being present in the delivery room despite getting a resounding no. My wife was having none of it. And after my son and his wife changed hospitals to throw my wife off after she threatened to barge into the room. She eventually found out, I didn't tell her, and got very mad. I told her to stop and think, because if she keeps this up she will lose all chances to see her grandbaby. She told me off and went to make a huge scene at the hospital my daughter-in-law was at. It did not end well and my wife came home crying hysterically after getting chewed out by our son and kicked out of the hospital. Things remained tense till my son called to invite me to see the baby for the first time. He did not invite my wife, which sent her into a mental breakdown. I had an argument with her after she tried to guilt me into staying with her and shame my son for keeping his mom away from her grandbaby, but I told her I told you so and said that she had plenty of opportunities to get right with our daughter-in-law, but she blew them away because of her stubbornness. She started yelling about how unsupportive and cruel I was, just like our son to be siding against her instead of defending her and staying home with her when our son banned her from meeting her grandbaby. I went anyway and she kept arguing about me taking the wrong side instead of defending her. I feel bad for her, but at the same time I think that she was being irrational and made this a compulsion despite knowing how our son and his wife felt about her behavior. Throwaway accounts and fake names. I don't think I'm Tahir, but one of my co-workers does and we both follow this Reddit, so we're letting Reddit decide. I, 28F, was named after a really obscure character from Greek mythology. My preferred nickname is taken from the end of my name. I always introduce myself with I'm, my name, but you can call me, nickname. None of my co-workers in the small business we work for have ever had a problem with this before, until Megan 25F, the niece of Jeff 50SM, one of the two owners, was hired. Jeff and Dave 50SM co-own the business, but Dave does the actual day-to-day running of the business. I introduced myself and my nickname as usual, but she immediately said that Bessie, not the actual name, would be a better nickname because it comes from the beginning of my name and that she liked it better. I told her I really didn't like that nickname and wouldn't answer to it and asked her to please not call me Bessie, but she insisted that it was so much prettier and that I just needed to get used to it. For the next 2 months she tried to call me Bessie, but I completely ignored her whenever she addressed me that way, even when I knew she really needed help with something. She would call my desk phone and say, "Hey Bessie," I would reply, "You have the wrong number, there's no Bessie here," and hang up. She then tried to get some of the employees outside the office to start calling me Bessie, but I quickly shut that down. I usually finish my work early and help them with a lot of tedious little things that aren't part of my job description and threatened to stop helping them unless they used my preferred nickname. Friday she decided she was going to get me to respond to Bessie no matter what. We have an open office design but are at opposite ends. She started calling out Bessie in a sing-song voice over and over again to try and annoy me enough to respond. Other co-workers got annoyed, most telling her to stop and one Lisa 43F telling me to just let her call me Bessie already. I refused and she kept calling out Bessie louder and louder, until Dave barged in. He'd been on a conference call with an important client and could hear her yelling from his office down the hall. He told her to be quiet and that if she called me Bessie one more time, he'd write her up and dock her pay. Later, Megan cornered me in the break room, called me an offer getting her in trouble and called me Bessie again for good measure just as Dave was walking in to heat up his lunch. He gave her a stern look and said, "I warned you." Then he walked to HR to have her written up. Lisa is saying I'm the offer never helping Megan and that, if I had been nicer or hadn't fought her so hard on the nickname, she probably would have given up on it a while ago, but because I made such a big deal out of it, it became a challenge. So Reddit, Ada? My sister, 26, brought her new boyfriend, 30, over to our parents' house to meet him for the first time. My wife and I came as well. We met the dude. He seemed okay-ish at first, but he then started asking weird and personal questions. My wife had a breast cancer and got a single mastectomy last year. She told the story to my sister's boyfriend and he was like, "Oh," then he stared at my wife briefly, then playfully said without even asking, "I can pretty much tell which one got the blow." We were floored. My wife could barely keep a straight face. She lied so she could leave the table cause she was literally about to tear up. I just looked at the dude and said, "Are you serious?" He said, "What?" I was just joking, bro. I started asking him to explain the joke to me. He just stared. I asked him again to explain it to me in details but still got no answer. My sister asked me to stop because clearly he got uncomfortable, but I insisted he explain the joke to me cause clearly ... My wife and I didn't get it. Things got awkward with him avoiding eye contact while I just stared at him the entire time. I still insisted and asked him to explain the joke right there and then, but seconds later he said he needed to step outside to make a phone call. Turns out he got in his car and left. My sister had a meltdown screaming and berating me for how I treated her boyfriend. Calling me hostile with anger issues to scare her boyfriend out of our parents' house. I told her he was overstepping and made my wife uncomfortable to the point of crying. She actually called me wife such a princess and said she is soft and cannot take some teasing. I had an argument with her and my parents intervened. I took my wife and left. My dad called me later and said that he understood how hurt my wife felt, but my sister's boyfriend was visiting for the first time and I showed hostility and aggression instead of just ignoring him. He encouraged me to reach out to him and my sister later and talk it out, but I declined. Ada? Edit. My sister and my wife don't have a history, but my sister tends to see the worst in people. When my wife announced her diagnosis, my sister actually thought she was faking because the family no longer brought up my wife's miscarriage months prior. I thought that was out of line and she apologized for it and we moved on. My sister thinks that the only bad trait she sees in her boyfriend is his smoking habit. She says that otherwise, he's perfect. SMFH. Hi. I, F34, am diabetic and keeping packaged snacks near me is essential, because oftentimes I get low blood sugar. Due to issues I have with appetite, I don't eat lunch or dinner properly. My brother-in-law and his pregnant wife moved in with us a month ago. The issue began when my sil started eating my snacks that I usually keep inside the fridge. I tried buying more snacks, but sometimes they run out and I end up drinking water mixed with sugar in the middle of the night because I don't have anything else to eat and my husband won't go out to the store and get me anything. I told my husband and he told me to be patient with his brother's wife because she's pregnant and is considered sort of sick, so she needs to be cut some slack. I had it, to be honest. I moved all my snacks into the bedroom and inside a box just to keep them safe. Sil said it was strange that I no longer buy snacks, but I told her that I actually still do. I just keep them safe in my room so no one can touch them. She side-eyed me. Then an argument ensued after my husband and his brother came home. My husband berated me for being rude to Sil and childish for moving the snacks and keeping them in the bedroom. I told him why I did that though. He knew what was up, but he said I overreacted and that there was no harm in sharing. He demanded I put whatever snacks I have back into the fridge and stop acting like a child, but I said that I won't, and if his sil and her husband get upset then they need to understand that I'm diabetic and need those snacks essentially. He yelled in my face calling me childish, then walked out. Bill and Sil are cold shouldering me. And my husband keeps pushing for me to put the snacks back into the fridge where they belong or he won't speak to me as well. Ada?